Day 49. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 49 days since she disappeared from her Catalina Foothills home in Tucson, Arizona, in the early morning hours of February 1st, 2026. And multiple sources close to the investigation are saying the same thing. This case is about to break. The evidence is converging. The forensic analysis is complete. The digital trail has been mapped. The DNA has been processed through investigative genetic genealogy. The cell tower data has identified devices present at critical locations on critical dates. And investigators working this case with resources that include over 400 law enforcement personnel, approximately 100 FBI agents, specialized forensic teams, and cutting-edge technology believe they are closer to solving what happened to Nancy Guthrie than the public knows. What we know on Day 49 is not just about where the investigation started or what questions remain unanswered. What we know on Day 49 is about where the investigation is now, what evidence has been developed over 7 weeks of intensive work, what patterns have emerged from analyzing thousands of tips and hundreds of hours of surveillance footage and weeks of laboratory analysis, and why former FBI agents and investigative experts who have been following this case publicly are saying that arrest could be imminent. The case is about to break, and here is what we know. Before we examine the evidence that has investigators believing they are on the verge of a breakthrough in Nancy Guthrie's case, make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Vault and have notifications turned on. We have been covering this investigation from day one with detailed analysis of every development, expert commentary from former FBI agents, and comprehensive examination of the evidence that mainstream media overlooks. Hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button to support investigative journalism that goes deeper than surface-level reporting. And drop a comment telling us what you think is the most significant piece of evidence in this case. Your engagement helps this content reach more people who might have information that could help bring Nancy home. Now let's examine exactly what investigators know on Day 49 and why this case is about to break. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, disappeared from her home, valued at approximately $1 million in the Catalina Foothills area of Tucson on February 1st, 2026. The last confirmed sighting was at 9:50 p.m. on January 31st, when she returned home from her daughter Annie's house after a family dinner and game night. The garage door opened and closed. She was inside. She was safe. She had her medication, her hearing aids, her phone, everything she needed. For the next 14 hours, nobody checked on her. She was reported missing at 12:03 p.m. on February 1st, when a church friend called Annie to say Nancy had not appeared for the virtual Sunday service she attended every single week without exception. Annie drove to the house. Everything that belonged to Nancy was there. Everything except Nancy. The timeline that investigators have reconstructed through digital forensics, camera analysis, and medical device data is precise down to the minute. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, the Nest doorbell camera at Nancy's front entrance was physically disabled. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed this at his February 5th press conference. He said investigators would not detail how they believed the disconnection happened, but he did not characterize it as a technical malfunction or a battery failure. The implication was clear. Someone put their hands on that camera and took it offline before entering the property. At 2:12 a.m., motion detection software registered movement at the property, but no video was captured because the camera was offline. That 25-minute gap between camera being disabled and motion being detected is significant because it suggests activity happened during that window that the camera would have recorded if it had been functioning. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with the iPhone on her nightstand. The phone had not moved. It was exactly where she left it every night beside her hearing aids on the nightstand in her bedroom. Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe explained publicly in an interview with Brian Enton that when a pacemaker loses Bluetooth connection to a monitoring device, the most likely explanation is physical distance. The device has a limited range, typically around 30 feet, depending on obstacles and interference. If the person wearing the pacemaker moves beyond that range, the signal is lost. Nancy was being moved. She was being transported. She was already gone from that house by the time the signal died. That pacemaker data is critical because it provides an endpoint to the timeline. Camera disabled at 1:47. Pacemaker lost connection at 2:28. That is 41 minutes. 41 minutes that someone spent inside Nancy's home doing whatever was done to remove her from the property. At 2:36 a.m., a Ring doorbell camera belonging to neighbors Elias and Danielle Stratagulis, who live approximately 2.5 miles from Nancy's home, captured a vehicle moving through their neighborhood. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz drove the route from Nancy's house to the Stratagulis residence. It took 6 minutes. Pacemaker disconnect at 2:28. 6 minutes of driving. Vehicle appears at 2:36, 8 minutes total with 2 minutes of margin. The kind of pause you make when you check your mirrors, adjust your grip on the steering wheel, take a breath before pulling onto back roads at 2:30 in the morning with evidence in your vehicle. That timeline has been confirmed and verified through multiple independent sources and represents one of the most precise sequences investigators have been able to establish in any major case. When investigators arrived at Nancy's home at 12:03 p.m., 11 hours after the camera went dark, they found blood on the front porch, on the door, and in the driveway. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed the blood was tested through DNA analysis and matched Nancy Guthrie. Former FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell, who has spent a career analyzing crime scenes, examined photographs of the blood pattern and described what she saw publicly in an interview with Brian Enton. The droplets were falling straight down from a stationary height. There were no voids from footprints stepping through the blood. There was no smearing from someone being dragged. There were no drag marks showing a body pulled across the surface. Her assessment delivered on camera was unambiguous. Nancy was wrapped in something, likely a sheet or a blanket, and carried through the front door. She was not walking under her own power when she left her own home for the last time. That blood pattern analysis is significant because it tells investigators about how Nancy was moved and how many people were likely involved in moving her. Carrying a 150-pound person who is wrapped in something and who may be unconscious or resisting requires strength and coordination. One person carrying that weight from inside a house through doorways, down porch steps, across a driveway to a vehicle would struggle, would risk dropping the person, would leave additional blood from lack of control, would create smearing or dragging as they adjusted their grip or set the person down to rest. Two people working together, one at the shoulders and one at the legs, can move methodically and carefully, can avoid dropping, can maintain control, can move without leaving the chaotic blood evidence that solo carrying would create. The clean droplet pattern suggests coordination and planning rather than panic and improvisation. The FBI, working with Google engineers over 10 days, extracted footage from what FBI Director Kash Patel described as residual data located in back-end systems of the Nest doorbell camera. The camera had no cloud subscription. Under normal circumstances, footage that is not uploaded to the cloud is stored only locally on the device. If the device is disabled or destroyed, that footage is lost forever. But Google engineers were able to recover what Patel called residual data, fragments of video that had been transmitted to Google's servers during brief moments of connectivity before the camera went fully offline. That recovery took 10 days of technical work involving engineers who understand the architecture of Nest systems and who were able to find and extract data that most people would assume was gone. That footage produced the images that have been shown on every major news network in America. A masked figure on Nancy's porch, moving with what body language analysts publicly described as ownership behavior. No hesitation, no nervousness, no scanning the area looking for threats. Head down, walking directly to the camera as someone who knows exactly where it is. Tapping the lens twice as if testing whether it is still recording. Covering it with vegetation pulled from a nearby potted plant. Every movement deliberate and confident. The FBI identified the suspect from that footage as male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10" tall, with an average build, wearing full face covering, dark clothing, black nitrile gloves, a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart, and a gun holster positioned on his right hip. Forensic image analysts identified what appears to be a possible tattoo on his right wrist, partially visible despite the gloves. And critically, this detail, confirmed by sources to ABC News, CBS News, CNN, and Fox News independently. One of the images showing the suspect without the backpack was captured on a different day from the footage showing him with the backpack on the night Nancy disappeared. A prior visit, a reconnaissance mission. He came once to look, to assess, to confirm the plan would work. He studied the property. He looked at the camera. He understood the layout. He verified what he had been told by whoever provided inside information. He left. And then days or weeks later, he came back wearing the backpack and carrying out the plan. That prior visit is evidence of planning that extended over time rather than being an impulsive decision made in the moment. What investigators know on day 49 is not limited to that timeline and that footage. What they know extends far beyond what has been made public. What they know includes patterns developed through analysis of evidence that news cameras have never filmed, through forensic work that takes weeks to complete in laboratories, through systematic investigation of every person who had access to Nancy's home and every digital trace left behind by phones and devices present in the area during critical windows. On day 49, investigators know things they did not know on day 1 or day 10 or even day 30. They know things that have come from patient methodical detective work combined with cutting-edge forensic science. And those things are pointing them toward identification with increasing precision. First, investigators know with certainty that this was not a random crime committed by a stranger who happened to target Nancy by chance. Sheriff Chris Nanos stated publicly in his March 13th interview with NBC News, quote, "We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted." That statement represents a fundamental conclusion reached through analysis of all available evidence over 7 weeks of investigation. Random crimes do not involve 8 months of sustained Google searches for a specific victim's address. Investigators have confirmed through digital forensics and through cooperation with Google that searches for Nancy Guthrie's address began in June 2025 and continued through January 2026. Someone was researching her location for 8 months before acting. That is not random. That is targeting. Random crimes do not involve image searches in March and November 2025, presumably looking for photographs of Nancy's property that would allow visual study of the house, the yard, the entrance, the camera positions without conducting in-person reconnaissance immediately. Random crimes do not involve research in December 2025 into Savannah Guthrie's salary as co-anchor of the Today Show, clearly designed to assess the family's wealth and determine how much ransom could reasonably be demanded. Random crimes do not involve reconnaissance visits on multiple dates weeks apart. The FBI has asked neighbors for camera footage from January 11th and January 24th in addition to February 1st. All 3 dates are Saturdays. That pattern suggests someone whose weekday work schedule did not allow for daytime surveillance or reconnaissance. Saturday would be the day someone with a Monday through Friday job could come to the Catalina foothills without having to explain absences or raise suspicion from employers or coworkers. Random crimes do not involve the level of planning visible in the equipment, the timing, the knowledge of camera placement, the understanding of how to disable the Nest system, the coordination required to move Nancy from wherever she was in the house to the front entrance and into a vehicle during a precise 41-minute window. Nancy was targeted. Specifically, deliberately. After months of research and planning, investigators know this, and they know why she was targeted, even though Sheriff Nanos declined to reveal that motive publicly, citing the need to protect the integrity of the investigation. But the fact that they know the why means they can focus investigative resources on suspects who fit that motive rather than examining infinite possibilities across the entire population. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has stated repeatedly in interviews with Newsweek and the Daily Mail that her #1 theory is that people with some tangential connection to the household exposed insider knowledge to criminals. That theory aligns precisely with what investigators appear to be pursuing based on the categories of people they are examining and the questions they are asking. Tangential connection means peripheral or indirect relationship. Not family or close friends, but people who had access through providing services or making deliveries or working on the property. People who in the ordinary course of their work would observe that Nancy lived alone, had limited mobility, was elderly and vulnerable, had a daughter who is famous and wealthy, lived in a valuable home in a good neighborhood. People who might share that information with others without understanding what it would be used for, or people who might themselves see opportunity and begin planning. Second, investigators know that entry to Nancy's home on the night of February 1st did not involve forced entry through doors or windows that would leave the obvious damage and evidence that breaking and entering creates. There is no evidence of damage to the security gate that protects Nancy's front door. There is no evidence of damage to the wooden door behind it. There is no evidence of broken windows or pry marks or splintered wood or bent frames or any of the traces that forcing your way into a secured property leaves behind. A neighbor named Laura, who lives 4 houses away from Nancy and who has the exact same type of security gate on her own front door, explained to NBC correspondent Brian Entin in an interview that aired on March 16th that those gates are nearly impossible to force open without power tools, without sustained noise that would wake neighbors, without leaving obvious damage that investigators would document immediately. Laura said, quote, "You are not breaking into those gates. You are never going to break into that security gate." She continued saying she talked to a security professional about it, and he confirmed the same thing. To force one of those gates open, you would need bolt cutters to cut through the steel mesh, or a pry bar strong enough to bend the frame, or enough time and leverage to rip the mounting bolts out of the door jamb and surrounding structure. Any of those methods would be loud. Metal cutting metal makes noise. Prying steel makes noise. Ripping bolts from masonry makes noise. And any of those methods would leave damage that would be immediately visible. Cut mesh, bent frame, torn bolt holes. The suspect visible in doorbell footage is not carrying tools that could breach a steel security gate. His hands are visible in some frames, gloved and empty except for the vegetation he uses to cover the camera. He is not dressed like someone who came prepared to force his way through a security barrier in the middle of the night. The absence of forced entry evidence means access was gained through one of 3 methods: a key that allowed unlocking the gate and door without damage, assistance from someone who opened the door from inside, allowing entry without needing to force anything, or a door or window left unlocked either by Nancy, who might have forgotten to secure something, or by someone who had prior access to the house and deliberately left an entry point available for later use. All 3 possibilities require connection to Nancy or to her home. Keys do not appear randomly. Someone gave keys, or someone made copies, or someone who once had legitimate access to keys kept them. Inside assistance requires an inside person. Unlocked entry points require knowledge of Nancy's routines and habits, which doors she checked and which she might overlook, what time she went to bed and stopped moving through the house. All roads lead back to someone who had been in that house before February 1st. Third, investigators know the identities of everyone who had documented access to Nancy's property in recent months and years. This is not speculation. This is systematic investigation following standard protocols for cases where access and inside knowledge appear to be factors. Service providers who worked on the house are identifiable through financial records. Nancy paid for services over the years. Bank statements going back multiple years show checks written to companies or individuals. Credit card statements show charges for work performed. Each payment represents someone who had access. Contractors who made repairs are documented. Building permits if structural work was done. Invoices and receipts. Company records showing which employees were assigned to which addresses on which dates. Landscapers who maintain the yard have service contracts and billing records. Pool service, if the property has a pool, maintains logs of visits and work performed. House cleaners are typically hired on regular schedules, weekly or bi-weekly, and payment records show duration and frequency of that access. Delivery drivers with regular routes are tracked through comprehensive systems maintained by USPS, UPS, FedEx, Amazon, and other services. Every package delivered to Nancy's address creates a record showing the delivery company, the date, the time, and often the specific driver or delivery person who completed that delivery. If certain drivers delivered to her address frequently or regularly, those drivers become people of significant investigative interest because they had repeated access and opportunity to observe. Uber and Lyft drivers who transported Nancy are completely documented through digital records maintained by those companies. Every ride creates a permanent record showing who the passenger was, who the driver was, where pickup occurred, where drop-off occurred, what route was taken, how long the trip lasted, what the fare was. If Nancy used rideshare services, investigators can obtain complete records of every trip she ever took through those platforms. Every driver who ever drove her becomes someone who had access to information about where she lives. Opportunity to see inside her house when she opened the door to leave or return. Opportunity to have conversations during rides that might reveal information about her life, her family, her routine, her vulnerabilities. Anyone who had legitimate reasons to be at the address for any purpose becomes part of a finite list. And that list, while potentially containing dozens or even hundreds of names depending on how many years back investigators examine, is manageable through systematic investigation. Each person can be contacted, each can be interviewed, each can be asked to account for their whereabouts on February 1st. Each can be asked to provide voluntary DNA samples for comparison and elimination purposes. Each has digital footprints that can be examined, cell phone records showing where their phones were on critical dates, financial records showing purchases, employment records showing work schedules, social media activity showing associations and communications. Fourth, investigators know which cell phones were present in the Catalina foothills area on January 11th, January 24th, and February 1st. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, a specialized unit that exists specifically for this type of forensic work, has been mapping device presence across those 3 critical Saturdays. This is not theoretical. This is technical work that produces concrete results. Every cell phone in the United States communicates constantly with nearby towers to maintain connection to the network. Every communication creates a log entry in carrier systems showing which phone identified by its unique IMEI number and phone number was communicating with which tower at which specific time. Those logs are retained by carriers and can be obtained by law enforcement through appropriate legal process. By analyzing those logs across 3 separate dates, investigators can identify phones that appear in the Catalina foothills area on more than one occasion. A phone present once might belong to someone passing through the area for legitimate, unrelated reasons. A phone present on 2 of the 3 dates creates interest. A phone present on all 3 Saturdays, particularly if tower data places it not just somewhere in the general Catalina foothills region, which covers many square miles, but specifically near Nancy's address based on which tower it was communicating with, and signal strength analysis becomes a phone of very significant investigative interest. Modern cell tower analysis using multiple towers and triangulation can determine location within a few hundred feet in areas with good tower density. The Catalina foothills as an affluent area has good coverage. If that phone present on all 3 dates belongs to someone who also had documented access to Nancy's home through providing services or making deliveries or driving her in rideshare, the convergence of evidence becomes extremely powerful. Independent evidence streams pointing to the same person. Cell tower data saying this phone was in the area on reconnaissance dates and on execution date. Service records saying this person worked at Nancy's address. Financial records confirming payment. Employment records confirming the person's work schedule aligns with Saturday availability. That convergence is the kind of evidence that builds prosecutable cases. Fifth, investigators know what digital traces were left on Nancy's home router on the night of February 1st and potentially on earlier dates if the router logs extend back far enough. Router logs contain multiple types of data. One critical type is probe requests. These are signals that smartphones and other wireless devices broadcast automatically and constantly when they are searching for familiar Wi-Fi networks to connect to. Your phone remembers networks it has connected to before. Your home network, your work network, networks at places you visit regularly. When you are within range of those networks, your phone broadcasts probe requests, asking if that network is available. The phone does this in the background without you doing anything. You never see it happening. But it happens constantly. Every device within range of Nancy's router on the night of February 1st that was searching for Wi-Fi networks may have left probe request traces in the router logs. Those traces contain the MAC address of the device, a unique hardware identifier, and potentially the names of networks the device was searching for. If a phone that should not have been in Nancy's house that night, a phone belonging to someone who had no legitimate reason to be there, left probe requests in her router logs, that is digital evidence of presence. Unlike DNA, which requires weeks of laboratory processing and complex analysis, digital forensics can extract and analyze router data in hours or days once the router is in FBI possession. The FBI has Nancy's router. They have had it since the early days of the investigation. 7 weeks is more than enough time to extract every piece of data it contains. If those logs contain probe requests from a phone of interest, and if that phone's identifier matches a phone that cell tower data places in the area on January 11th and January 24th based on carrier records, and if that phone belongs to someone on the list of people who had documented access to Nancy's property, The pattern becomes undeniable. 3 independent evidence sources. Router saying this device was inside the house. Cell tower saying this device was in the neighborhood on reconnaissance dates. Service records saying this person worked there. That is convergence that eliminates reasonable doubt. 6th, investigators know the results of forensic genetic genealogy analysis on DNA evidence recovered from Nancy's property. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly in multiple interviews that DNA found at the scene that does not belong to Nancy or to people in close contact with her is being analyzed through investigative genetic genealogy. He also acknowledged challenges in his March 13th NBC interview, saying investigators are still having challenges processing mixed DNA, and that the mixture could be from several people. Mixed DNA is extremely common in residential environments because every person who enters a home leaves DNA constantly. Skin cells shed at a rate of tens of thousands per day. Touching any surface deposits some of those cells along with DNA. Breathing deposits DNA through microscopic saliva droplets. Over time, DNA accumulates from everyone who has been in the home. Family members, friends, guests, service providers, delivery people, anyone who entered and breathed and touched anything. In Nancy's home, the mixed DNA likely represents multiple sources. Nancy herself, obviously. Family members who visited, including her daughters and their families. Friends who came for social visits. Service providers who had been in the house at various times performing work. If a plumber came 6 months ago to fix a leak, that plumber's DNA from touching faucets and pipes might still be present. If house cleaners came monthly, their DNA from cleaning surfaces throughout the house would definitely be present. All of that DNA from all of those different people creates a complex mixture when collected from surfaces during evidence processing. The challenge for forensic laboratories is separating that mixture into individual profiles, so each person's DNA can be identified and analyzed separately. Modern forensic DNA laboratories can accomplish this separation using advanced techniques. They use statistical algorithms that analyze genetic markers at multiple locations on the DNA molecule and use probability calculations to determine which markers likely belong together as a single individual's profile versus which markers likely came from different individuals. The process is complex and time-consuming, especially when the mixture contains DNA from more than 3 or 4 people, which appears to be the case based on Sheriff Nanos saying it could be from several people. But the work can be done, and 7 weeks is sufficient time to make substantial progress or even complete that separation depending on complexity. Once individual profiles are successfully separated from the mixture, each profile becomes an investigative tool. Each can be searched against CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, a national database containing DNA profiles from convicted felons and from arrestees in jurisdictions that collect DNA at arrest. A match in CODIS would immediately identify someone with criminal history. Each profile can be compared against DNA collected from other evidence in this case, like the gloves that were reportedly found. A match between a profile from the mixed DNA at Nancy's house and DNA from the gloves would connect that individual directly to evidence associated with the crime. And each profile can be traced through forensic genetic genealogy if it does not match anything in CODIS. Forensic genetic genealogy is the technique that has revolutionized cold case investigation in recent years. The Golden State Killer was identified in 2018 after 40 years of his crimes going unsolved. Brian Kohberger was connected to the Idaho student murders within weeks of that crime occurring. Dozens of other major cases have been solved. The process works by uploading DNA profiles to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, where they are compared against millions of voluntary submissions from people who uploaded their DNA to explore ancestry and find relatives. When investigative DNA is uploaded, it gets compared against all those submissions. Matches indicate shared genetic ancestry. Typically, the matches are not the suspect themselves, but distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins who share common ancestors with the suspect several generations back. Forensic genealogists who specialize in this work then use traditional genealogical research methods. They build family trees working backward from the genetic matches to identify common ancestors. Then they work forward from those ancestors through all descendants, mapping out entire family lines across generations. That research identifies everyone alive today who descends from the common ancestors and who therefore could potentially be the source of the DNA. That list might initially contain hundreds of people spread across the country or even internationally. But that list can be filtered dramatically using characteristics known about the suspect from other evidence. The doorbell camera footage shows the suspect is male. That eliminates all female descendants. The suspect is approximately 5'9" to 5'10" according to FBI analysis. That eliminates anyone significantly taller or shorter. The suspect has a black mustache visible in the footage despite the mask. That eliminates anyone who cannot grow facial hair or who has facial hair of different color. The suspect was in Tucson, Arizona on February 1st, 2026. That eliminates anyone who can prove through employment records, travel records, witness statements that they were in different states or countries on that date. Each filter reduces the list. After filtering, the genealogy candidate list might contain 20 or 30 people who match all known characteristics and who cannot be eliminated. Each of those people becomes a person of interest who can be investigated further. And this is where convergence becomes extraordinarily powerful. If one of those 20 genealogy candidates is also on the list of people who had access to Nancy's home through providing services, that is significant correlation. If that person's cell phone was in the Catalina foothills area on January 11th, January 24th, and February 1st, based on tower data, that is more correlation. If that person's phone left probe requests in Nancy's router logs, that is more correlation. If that person purchased an Ozark Trail backpack from Walmart that can be traced through transaction records, that is more correlation. When multiple completely independent lines of evidence all point to the same person, that creates the kind of certainty that supports arrest and prosecution. Seventh, investigators know the transaction history for the Ozark Trail backpack visible in the doorbell footage. That backpack is a specific model, a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack that is sold exclusively at Walmart stores. Walmart operates one of the most sophisticated inventory tracking and transaction systems in retail. Every product that moves through Walmart's supply chain is tracked from manufacturer to distribution center to individual store to point of sale. Every store that received shipments of that specific model backpack in the months before February 1st can be identified through inventory records. Every transaction involving that product can be pulled from sales databases. Those databases contain complete information about every purchase. Credit card or debit card purchases include customer names through the payment information. The card used to pay links to a bank account which links to an account holder. That creates an immediate identification of the buyer. Cash purchases do not create that electronic trail, but they occur in stores with extensive security camera coverage. Walmart has cameras at every register. Cameras monitor checkout lines from multiple angles. Cameras in parking lots capture vehicles and license plates. If investigators request footage from Walmart stores in the Tucson area and surrounding regions showing purchases of that specific backpack model during the relevant time frame from, say, October 2025 through January 2026, to cover planning period, that footage shows who bought the backpack. Cameras capture faces clearly enough for identification, especially modern high-definition systems. Parking lot cameras capture license plates clearly enough to read plate numbers. License plates trace to registered owners through motor vehicle databases. Even if someone paid cash and tried to avoid identification, if they drove to the store, their vehicle was captured. If they walked or took rideshare, their face was captured during the purchase. If they tried to obscure their face during purchase by wearing hat and sunglasses, that behavior itself might be memorable to cashiers and might appear suspicious on camera in ways that draw investigative attention. The backpack creates a traceable evidence trail from suspect to purchase to identification. Eighth, investigators know that the FBI asked at least one neighbor, the neighbor Laura, who spoke to Brian Enton, specifically about internet connectivity on the night of February 1st. Laura told Enton in her interview that aired March 16th that when FBI agents visited her home on Friday, March 14th, they asked whether her internet went down on the night Nancy disappeared. That is not a casual question. That is not something investigators ask based on curiosity or general interest. That is a question investigators ask when they have reason to believe internet service may have been intentionally disrupted as part of operational planning. The FBI does not waste time asking irrelevant questions. If they are asking about internet outages, it means evidence suggests outages occurred or technology was used to cause outages. If internet service in the neighborhood was cut either by physically severing fiber optic or cable lines at utility junction boxes, or by using portable jamming devices, it would explain multiple puzzling aspects of this case. It would explain why Nancy's cell phone, which was left on the nightstand beside her hearing aids, did not transmit location data that could be tracked after she was taken from the house. Modern smartphones constantly communicate with cell towers and with Wi-Fi networks updating their location in real time. If Nancy's phone was connected to her home Wi-Fi network and that Wi-Fi went down at the same time, cellular service was jammed or disrupted, the phone would show her last known location as her home address and then go silent. No pings, no location updates, no trail for investigators to follow. The phone becomes useless for tracking because it cannot communicate. It would explain why neighbors' security cameras in the immediate area did not capture useful footage of vehicles entering or leaving the neighborhood during the critical window between 1:47 a.m. and 2:36 a.m. Many residential security systems, particularly the kind that affluent homeowners in areas like the Catalina foothills install, rely on internet connectivity to upload footage to cloud storage in real time. If the internet was down when the suspect was moving through the neighborhood, cameras would still record locally to SD cards or internal storage, but they would not transmit to the cloud. And if the suspect did not pass directly in front of those cameras, or if cameras were positioned to monitor driveways and front doors rather than streets, there would be no footage captured of the vehicle. The only footage would be from cameras that happened to be positioned where the vehicle passed and that happened to be recording locally. It would explain why the Nest doorbell camera at Nancy's door did not upload footage to Google's cloud in real time, requiring the FBI and Google engineers to spend 10 days extracting residual data from back-end systems. Nest cameras are designed to upload continuously when connected to internet. If Nancy's camera had been connected during the critical period, the footage would have been in Google's cloud immediately accessible. The fact that it was not in the cloud and required extraordinary technical recovery effort suggests the camera was not able to transmit. If internet service was down, the camera could not transmit even if it wanted to. The camera could record locally, which is how fragments ended up in buffers that got transmitted during brief moments of connectivity, but it could not upload complete footage to cloud storage. And intentional internet disruption would indicate a level of technical knowledge and sophistication that dramatically narrows the suspect pool. Cutting internet service to a residential area can be done in several ways, but all require knowledge that most criminals do not possess. The most direct method is physically severing the fiber optic or cable lines that provide connectivity to homes in a neighborhood. Those lines are accessible in utility boxes, junction points, and above-ground installations that are typically marked and can be located by someone with basic understanding of telecommunications infrastructure. Someone with that knowledge could locate the right junction box serving Nancy's neighborhood, open it using basic tools, and cut the lines with bolt cutters or wire strippers. The disruption would be immediate. Service would go down for every home connected to that node, and unless someone called the internet service provider to report the outage, which most people would not do in the middle of the night, it might not be repaired until normal business hours the next day. The other method is signal jamming using portable devices. Portable Wi-Fi and cellular jammers are illegal to own or operate in the United States under federal law, but they are available for purchase online from foreign suppliers. A jammer powerful enough to disrupt service in a residential area the size of several blocks in the Catalina foothills neighborhood would fit in a backpack. The suspect in the doorbell footage is wearing a backpack. If that backpack contained a jammer rather than tools or stolen property, it would explain why he wore it to the door and why he appeared to be carrying it throughout the operation. A jammer would need to be powered on and positioned appropriately to create an interference field that blocks signals. Carrying it in a backpack would allow mobility and positioning. Both methods, physical line cutting and electronic jamming, require forethought, technical knowledge, and understanding that internet and cellular connectivity are vulnerabilities that can be exploited to defeat security systems and tracking. Most criminals do not think at that level. Most criminals do not understand telecommunications infrastructure well enough to know which lines to cut, where junction boxes are located, how to identify the right cables. Most criminals do not know that portable jammers exist, or how to acquire them, or how to use them effectively. Most criminals operate in the physical world, picking locks, breaking windows, overpowering victims without considering the digital dimension of crime scenes and the evidence trails that connected devices create. This suspect, or the person advising this suspect, understood the digital dimension, understood that cameras rely on internet, understood that phones rely on cellular and Wi-Fi, understood that disrupting those services would create blind spots in surveillance and tracking. That understanding suggests either professional training in telecommunications or IT fields, prior experience working with these systems, or coaching from someone who had that expertise and shared it. All of those possibilities narrow the suspect pool to people with specific backgrounds and knowledge. Laura said she did not notice her internet going down that night. She was asleep. She would not have known unless she woke up in the middle of the night, tried to use her phone, noticed the Wi-Fi was unavailable, and made note of the time. And even then, she might have assumed it was a temporary glitch, a brief outage that would resolve itself, and gone back to sleep without thinking about it further. But she also said she changed internet service providers 2 weeks after Nancy disappeared. She no longer has access to the service logs from early February that might show an outage or disruption during the critical window. Those logs, if they exist, would be retained by her former provider. Other neighbors may have that data. Other neighbors may not have switched providers. Other neighbors may have noticed outages and reported them. Other neighbors may have security systems that log connectivity status and would show if internet was down. And if the FBI is asking about it specifically, they may already have evidence from other sources that connectivity was disrupted. From the internet service provider itself, which would have network monitoring showing if a node went down. From neighbors who kept logs or reported issues. From analysis of devices that record connectivity drops automatically. If internet service was intentionally cut, it is one more piece of evidence pointing toward a planned, coordinated, technically sophisticated operation involving someone with inside knowledge of Nancy's property and someone with technical expertise working together or coaching each other. Ninth, investigators know that Sheriff Nanos believes the suspect could absolutely strike again, targeting other victims. When asked directly by NBC News reporter in the March 13th interview whether this person might target someone else, Nanos answered without hesitation, "Absolutely." That answer is significant for multiple reasons. It represents the first time Sheriff Nanos has directly addressed the question of whether others are at risk. In earlier press conferences and interviews, he emphasized that the family had been cleared, that investigators were following leads, that they believed Nancy could still be alive. But he had not directly addressed public safety concerns about whether the person who took Nancy might target someone else. Now he has, and his answer was unequivocal. Absolutely others could be at risk. But he also said something in that same interview that seems to create ambiguity. He said, quote, "We believe it was targeted, but we are not really sure. Targeted, but not sure." That statement appears contradictory on its surface, but actually reveals something about the state of the investigation. Investigators believe, based on evidence, that Nancy was specifically targeted rather than randomly selected. The 8 months of Google searches prove targeting. The reconnaissance visits prove targeting. The planning proves targeting. But what investigators are not certain about is the basis for that targeting. What made Nancy the target? What characteristics or factors led to her being selected? That uncertainty is what drives the concern that others could be at risk. Laura, the neighbor who lives 4 houses away, heard that quote and asked the same question many people are now asking. What does targeted mean? Targeted based on what criteria? She laid out the possibilities in her interview with Brian Enton. Was Nancy targeted because she had wealth? Because she had a famous daughter? Because she lived alone? Because she was elderly and vulnerable? Because someone knew the layout of her house from working there and saw an opportunity? Because of something specific to her personally that investigators know but we do not? Each possibility has different implications for risk to others. If the targeting was based on general characteristics that Nancy shares with other people in the Catalina foothills, wealth, living alone, advanced age, limited mobility, large home set back from the street with limited visibility from neighbors, wealthy family members who could pay ransom, then yes, the person who did this could absolutely strike again. Anyone who fits that profile could be at risk. The Catalina foothills area is full of elderly, wealthy residents living alone in valuable homes. If the targeting criteria are that broad, dozens or hundreds of potential victims exist in that geographic area. That is why Sheriff Nanos warned the public. That is why he said, do not think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you are safe. Keep your wits about you. But if the targeting was specific to Nancy Guthrie based on personal knowledge of her routine, her family, her specific vulnerabilities, her specific value as a target because of Savannah's fame and wealth, then the risk to others may be lower. If this was personal, if this was about Nancy specifically rather than about elderly wealthy women generally, then others fitting the general profile might not be at equivalent risk. The problem is, investigators do not yet know which scenario is correct. They believe it was targeted. They may even know the motive, but they cannot confirm whether that motive applies only to Nancy or whether it applies to a category of victims that includes Nancy and others. That uncertainty is what has neighbors throughout the Catalina foothills reconsidering their security measures, adding cameras, checking locks more carefully, looking more critically at service providers who come to their doors, asking for identification, verifying company names before letting anyone onto their property, joining neighborhood watch groups, starting informal networks where neighbors check on each other regularly. Laura said she has made changes to her own security since Nancy disappeared. She did not want to specify what those changes were, a reasonable decision given that describing your security measures publicly eliminates their effectiveness by telling potential criminals exactly what they would need to defeat. But she confirmed that what happened to Nancy 4 houses away has fundamentally changed how she thinks about who has access to her home and how she monitors that access. Fear and vigilance that were not present before February 1st are now permanent features of life in a neighborhood that used to feel completely safe. 10th, investigators know that the combined reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery and to the identification and arrest of those responsible now exceeds $1.2 million. $1 million from the Guthrie family, $100,000 from the FBI, additional amounts from other sources and individuals who have contributed. Rewards of that magnitude create enormous psychological and financial pressure on anyone with knowledge of the crime who has not come forward. If multiple people were involved in planning or executing what happened to Nancy, if there were accomplices or people who provided assistance or people who have information but feared coming forward because of threats or loyalty or their own involvement, $1.2 million is life-changing money that alters calculations about silence. Former FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell described it publicly in vivid terms. She said the reward puts people in an air fryer, meaning the heat and pressure become unbearable. Someone knows something. Someone helped. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. Someone was told something. And $1.2 million makes silence increasingly difficult to maintain, especially as the investigation advances and evidence converges. If you are an accomplice who played a minor role, if you drove a vehicle or provided equipment or shared information, and you know that forensic science and digital investigation are closing in, the incentive to cooperate before arrest happens becomes overwhelming. The first person to talk gets the best deal. The person who waits until after arrest has far less bargaining power. $1.2 million rewards whoever talks first. That creates race dynamics among accomplices. Subscribe to True Crime Vault for continued comprehensive coverage as this investigation develops. Hit that subscribe button right now if you have not already. Turn on all notifications so you are immediately alerted when new developments break. Like this video to support investigative journalism that goes deeper than headlines and examines evidence systematically. Visit our channel for all previous detailed analysis of every aspect of this case. Comment below with your assessment of which piece of evidence will be most important for identification. Your engagement helps this content reach more people who might have information that could help. And if you have information, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The reward is $1.2 million. Every tip matters. Every call is reviewed. Every piece of information is followed. What all of this evidence means on day 49 is that investigators are not starting from zero searching blindly for someone who could be anyone, anywhere, doing anything. They have narrowed the universe of possible suspects through systematic elimination and through convergence of multiple independent evidence streams that all point in the same direction. They have a timeline that is accurate to the minute established through camera data, pacemaker data, and neighbor camera data showing vehicle movement. They have footage showing the suspect's height, build, movements, equipment, and behavior. They have DNA being separated from mixtures and traced through genetic genealogy to identify family trees. They have cell tower data mapping phone locations across 3 critical Saturdays. They have router logs showing digital traces left at the scene. They have transaction records for distinctive equipment. They have a comprehensive list of everyone with documented access to the victim's home. They have financial records showing payments for services. They have employment records showing work schedules. They have delivery logs. They have rideshare records. And they have motive understanding that allows them to focus on suspects who fit specific behavioral and circumstantial profiles. The investigation is not complete. If it were complete, there would be arrest and charges and someone in custody. But the investigation is advanced. It is in late stages. Former FBI agents analyzing this case publicly based on available evidence are saying arrest could be imminent. Jennifer Coffindaffer said in her March 16 Newsweek analysis that the billboard campaign, combined with additional camera footage being analyzed and DNA genealogy work and investigators knowing the motive, all suggest late-stage investigation approaching resolution. The billboards themselves indicate a specific phase of investigation. You do not launch massive billboard campaigns across 4 states featuring the victim's face and the FBI tip line when you are at the beginning of an investigation with no leads and no direction. You launch those campaigns when you are close, when you have developed strong evidence and strong theories, when you need that final piece of information that connects everything, when you need someone who recognizes something or knows something to come forward with the missing element. The additional camera footage recovered from motion-activated cameras at Nancy's property that were trained on swimming pool area, backyard area, and side yard areas is being analyzed 7 weeks into the investigation. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed on March 14th in an official statement that they continue to analyze various forms of evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case, including material from laboratories as well as images and videos captured by cameras. Videos plural. That confirmation tells us there is more footage than just the original doorbell camera video that was released to the public in February. Additional footage potentially shows the suspect's approach path to the house, potentially shows his movements during the 41-minute window when he was on the property, potentially shows him with Nancy if she was carried through areas visible to those cameras, potentially shows direction of departure and how he left the property. Different camera angles provide different information and eliminate alternative explanations for what happened. The forensic laboratory work is complete or nearly complete after 7 weeks. DNA separation from complex mixtures takes substantial time, but it is not an indefinite process. If investigators are saying publicly through Sheriff Nanos that the case is close, if they are saying they know the motive, if former FBI agents are saying arrest could be imminent, it means forensic work has produced results. Genetic genealogy takes time to build comprehensive family trees and to narrow candidate lists through filtering. But when it works definitively providing names. The Golden State Killer case took months of genealogy work but resulted in identification after 40 years of the case being cold. Brian Kohberger was connected to the Idaho murders through genetic genealogy within weeks. Nancy's case has had 7 weeks of intensive genetic genealogy work with substantial resources and expertise devoted to it. That is sufficient time to produce significant results or even complete identification depending on how good the DNA samples were and how many close relatives are in public databases. The digital forensics are complete. Cell tower analysis comparing device presence across 3 dates is a defined process. You request records from carriers, you analyze the data, you identify patterns, you match phone identifiers to subscriber information. Router log examination and extraction is technical work, but not indefinite work. You image the router, you extract logs, you analyze probe requests and connection attempts, you match MAC addresses to devices. The FBI has had Nancy's router since early February. 7 weeks is more than sufficient time to extract every piece of data it contains and to analyze that data completely. If investigators have results from that analysis, they have names of devices that were present when they should not have been. The systematic examination of everyone with access to Nancy's home through providing services or making deliveries or transporting her is ongoing, but has produced a narrowed list of persons of significant interest. You start with potentially hundreds of people. If you go back multiple years examining everyone who ever worked on the property or delivered to the address or drove her anywhere, you eliminate people systematically. People who have solid alibis for February 1st verified through multiple sources. People whose DNA collected voluntarily or through other means does not match evidence from the scene. People whose cell phones based on tower data were nowhere near the Catalina foothills on any of the 3 critical Saturdays. People who have no connection to the technical knowledge required to disable cameras or disrupt internet service. People whose financial records show no suspicious purchases. Each elimination reduces the list. At some point, the list becomes very manageable. A dozen names, half a dozen, maybe fewer. And when you have that short list, and you cross-reference it against all other evidence streams, DNA results from genetic genealogy, cell tower data showing phone locations, router logs showing devices present, transaction records showing equipment purchases, employment records showing work schedules aligning with Saturday availability, the convergence becomes powerful. One name or 2 names, if the inside accomplice theory is correct, appear in multiple independent evidence categories. That convergence is what builds cases that result in arrests and prosecutions. That convergence is what investigators mean when they say they are close. The inside accomplice theory that the neighbor Laura proposed based on the physical impossibility of forcing open Nancy's security gate without tools and noise and damage that investigators never found has significant investigative support. If someone opened that gate from inside, if someone let the masked figure on the porch into the house, investigators are looking for that inside person in addition to looking for the outside person. That doubles the potential for identification because 2 people create twice as much evidence. 2 people have 2 cell phones that leave 2 digital trails. 2 people make twice as many purchases. 2 people have twice as many employment records and alibis to verify or debunk. 2 people create twice as many opportunities for someone else to notice something suspicious, to remember a conversation, to see something that seemed odd at the time but makes sense now. 2 people create twice as many opportunities for one of them to crack under pressure and talk. The FBI asking neighbors specifically about January 24th as a 3rd critical date in addition to the previously mentioned January 11th and February 1st indicates pattern recognition and systematic investigation, building a timeline of reconnaissance and planning. 3 Saturdays, 3 visits. Initial reconnaissance on January 11th to visually confirm what inside information provided about the property, the camera, the gate, the layout. 2nd visit on January 24th, possibly to finalize specific operational details, to test approach routes, to verify timing, to confirm that the plan developed over previous weeks was viable and executable. Execution on February 1st with backpack and equipment and coordination. If cell tower data shows the same phone or the same phones on all 3 dates, that is not coincidence. That is not random. That is evidence of sustained planning and reconnaissance by identifiable individuals whose phones created permanent records. The FBI asking specifically about internet outages indicates investigators have reason beyond speculation to believe connectivity was disrupted. They do not ask that question randomly. They ask it because evidence points toward it. Perhaps other neighbors in addition to Laura have been asked and some reported outages. Perhaps internet service provider logs reviewed by investigators show disruption in that specific area during the critical window. Perhaps analysis of why multiple systems, the Nest camera, Nancy's phone, potentially other neighbor cameras, all failed to transmit data normally during that period points toward coordinated disruption rather than multiple independent coincidental failures. If internet was cut deliberately, it represents another dimension of evidence pointing toward technical sophistication and specific suspect characteristics. Nancy Guthrie disappeared 49 days ago from her home where she lived for 50 years after her husband died, where she raised 3 children, where she knew every neighbor, where she went to church every Sunday, where she built a life in a community where trust was normal, and where someone knocking on your door was not a threat, but a neighbor. Someone used that trust. Someone used access gained through what appeared to be legitimate normal reasons. Someone planned for 8 months. Someone researched online. Someone visited in person. Someone understood security systems. Someone knew about cameras and internet and how to defeat them. Someone had inside knowledge that made planning possible. And someone executed on February 1st, taking Nancy from her home, wrapped in something carried by what blood pattern analysis suggests were 2 people working together. For 49 days, that person or those people have known that the FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department are working this case with over 400 law enforcement personnel, approximately 100 FBI agents, specialized forensic teams, genetic genealogy experts, digital forensic specialists, cell tower analysis teams, and cutting-edge investigative technology. For 49 days, they have known that forensic science does not stop, that DNA does not lie, that cell towers record everything, that routers log all activity, that transaction records are permanent, that cameras capture more than you think. For 49 days, the distance between what happened and who made it happen has been shrinking. Evidence processing, analysis completing, patterns emerging, convergence occurring. On day 49, investigators know things they did not know on day 1. They know the timeline to the minute. They know entry was not forced. They know DNA profiles separated from mixtures. They know phones present on 3 Saturdays. They know digital traces left in router logs. They know equipment purchase trails. They know everyone with documented access. They know the motive even if they will not reveal it publicly. They know others could be at risk. They know this was targeted and planned and sophisticated. And they know that all of these independent evidence streams are pointing toward identification. The case is about to break. Former FBI agents say it publicly. The evidence says it through convergence. The timeline says it through precision. The forensics say it through results. 7 weeks of professional investigation using every tool modern law enforcement possesses is producing what it is designed to produce. Answers, identification, justice. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found. Her family deserves answers. The person who disabled that camera at 1:47 a.m. knows what happened in the 41 minutes before the pacemaker signal went silent at 2:28. The person who may have opened that security gate from inside knows what happened. The person who drove the vehicle that appeared on neighbor camera at 2:36 knows where Nancy was taken. And the forensic evidence, the DNA, the cell tower data, the router logs, the transaction records, the camera footage from 3 different Saturdays, the systematic investigation of everyone with access, all of it is pointing toward names. The investigation is in late stages. The case is close. And on day 49, everyone involved in this investigation, from FBI agents to sheriff's deputies to forensic scientists to genealogy specialists, knows that identification is not a question of if, but when. The case is about to break.